All righty. It is 6 o'clock, and I would like to call to order the January 14th, 2025 Auburn, Maine Planning Board, and I will start with roll call to my left.
Dave Trask.
Paul Jacques.
Stacy LeBlanc.
Bob Hayes.
Darren Finnegan. Tim DeRoche.
Maureen Hopkins.
All right, excellent. So we have a full member, Riley Bergeron, who is not in attendance today. So as such, I will be elevating Maureen to full membership with full voting privileges. Excellent. Okay, the next item on the agenda are the meeting minutes from our December meeting. So at this point in time, I would seek a motion to approve, or if anyone has any amendments to the meeting minutes, we can discuss those. Okay, seeing none, I would seek a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Excellent, motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is the public hearing site plan review for the Penley Corner residence. I will hand this over to staff for a briefing.
I don't have to. So the applicant is proposing to add 2 additional duplexes to this site. Currently, there are duplexes, one on each of the parcels, which I am just going to note was not seen in your aerial photos that were on your staff reports, because this was taken before those were built. They were built, one was built in 2023 and one was built in 2024. So after, if given approval tonight, there would be a total of 8 units on this, between the 2 sites.
There's this project's really, we get the authority to do this project through the passing of LD 2003 with the additional units. I know that there is some discussion about ADUs and the size, 1,500 square feet, but just to be clear, they've got the density here, so they've got the land mass to put the additional square footage for the second structure, essentially. 1 family or 2 family dwelling units are allowed in this zone. And again, I think that this is a good project. The particular project does not require any kind of stormwater permit. There's less than 1 acre of impervious area. We did have some special notes about the having turning and access points that fire reviewed. So I think everything is good there in terms of public safety and site distance for access management. I don't really have any other particular items on this one. Certainly we're more than happy to answer any questions from the board. All the setback requirements are met. And this one was basically sitting in the wings for the last year as we got through the LD 2003 ordinance and getting that through council and planning board.
Okay, any questions for staff before I bring up the applicant?
I have one.
Okay, perfect.
The smaller lot is 3 acres, yes?
Yes.
So that'll have 4 units on it, that's not,
Yes,
hasn't been
that's-
allowed in the past, but
Right. Yep.
now it is.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for staff before I bring up the applicant? Okay, seeing none, and if the applicant would like to come forward.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm Jim Corbin with Teradyne Consultants. I'm here with the applicant, John Valiers, as well. I just want to make sure we have, yes, all right, thank you very much, the most current plan in front of us. So 2 lots proposed here, existing lots, really. Lot 2 on the right with 2 duplexes, and lot 1 on the left with as well 2 duplexes. Each lot has an existing duplex on it that you may have seen driving by. And so we're proposing 2 additional duplexes, 1 on each lot. Additional to this is open space to the west, I would say, to the west of the lot. If you want to slide down, you can show that right there. That's largely undevelopable land, so making it part of dedicating it as open space. The lots will be served by private sewer and water and public power. I think that's it.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay, nope, okay.
Actually, maybe just point out the two existing
Yes, no problem.
units.
That would be building 1 and building 3.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, so at this point in time, I would seek a motion to open up public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second? Okay, excellent. All those in favor? Okay, excellent. At this point in time, I will open up public comment. Come to the podium, state your name, your address, and you will have 5 minutes. Okay, I am not seeing anyone, so at this moment, I would seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Seconded.
All right, all those in favor? Okay. All right, so at this point in time, we've heard from staff. We have no public comment, and we have heard from the applicant. So I would open it up to the board. Does anyone have any additional questions, any thoughts, any deliberations, considerations as we review this project?
I noticed that one of the recommendations talks about a blasting permit. Can you get into that just a little bit as to why that's needed?
Sure, so we have a new blasting ordinance, and in the ordinance, there's very specific language in there that we should be recommending in all of our approved site plan projects and subdivision projects, just a blanket statement in there that if blasting is needed, a permit is required. That is something that is new at the city, and I think that applicants should know about that. So we're going to put that we're recommending that as a condition.
So to say that we should anticipate seeing that much more frequently and just understanding it's a default statement.
That's correct.
Any other questions? If we have none, then I would seek a motion.
I make a motion that the proposal meets the requirements of sections 60-1359 and approve the subdivision to construct 2 residential duplex buildings on each of his 2 existing lots on Riverside Drive near Penley Corner for a total of 8 units, septic and wells. 1165 Riverside Drive, also City Assessor's Parcel ID 163-001-001. The proposed project should be considered pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 4, Subdivision, Article 16, and Article 4. Division 4, Low Density Rural Residence District. Under the stipulations, no development activity until any bonding or inspection fees is determined by the Auburn Engineering Department, and blasting permit in advance of blasting from the City of Auburn Planning, Permitting, and Code Department.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any discussion of the motion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All right, motion carries. Alrighty, so the next item we have on the agenda is a public hearing site plan review for Cooper paving sign. So again, I will hand this over to staff for a briefing.
So, give me 1 second. Cooper Paving is on Turner Road, and they currently have a sign that is around 25 square feet, and they're proposing a new one, which will be around 50 square feet. And this is larger than the standards in that district allow without a waiver. So they're in front of you tonight asking for a waiver that would allow them to put that larger sign. Their proposal is a double-sided sign that would be about 20 feet tall with LED lights underneath and a roof structure. So it would shine down, but be night sky compliant. And that's it. And in your staff reports, you'd see a picture of what they're proposing for their sign.
Yeah, I think at this point, I'd like to, invite, if there's no questions, I'd like to invite the applicant. There's some minor details about the application with DOT. And if they're here, I'd like to speak on behalf of this project.
Sure, yeah, do we have the applicant?
Hi, I'm Mike Otto here to represent Cooper Paving. I think John is referring to the fact that we applied for a license to allow the sign to stay where it was installed within the right-of-way, and the DOT has denied that. So with this application, we had shown a relocation on one of the site plans of where the sign has to move about 3 feet back. And we're going to move it back if we get your approvals. So I think that's what you're...
Yep, that's exactly what I was referring to. So the recommendation from staff to, move the sign back on the property line, beyond the property line will stand. So I just wanted to make sure. We hadn't gotten any final communication about that from the applicant, so I didn't feel comfortable speaking about it. Thank you.
Sign. Relocated new sign. There we go.
Yeah, on the plan, we had showed the existing light and gray. It has to move back 3 feet to get the roof and everything outside of the right-of-way. We thought where it was 75 feet back, the state would give us a license, but we were mistaken. I can answer any other questions you might have.
Okay, now that we have the applicant forward, does anyone have any questions for him?
No, I appreciate, John, you front-loading that, because I think most of my questions are now no longer questions.
Okay, so any questions for staff, no questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I will seek a motion to open public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, at this point in time, I will open up public comment. Please come to the podium. You have 5 minutes. State your name and your address.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Desjardins, 2768 Turner Road. Our property sits directly across from Cooper. Aside from the fact that they evidently have to move that sign, which is unfortunate, they are one of the best neighbors possible. Not only do they take care of their property, but they are conscientious about making sure that that whole area on their side of the road is picked up every Friday. I've never seen anybody so meticulous about taking care of their equipment, which just indicates how they care for the land. Every weekend during the summer, their equipment is being cleaned. So they are, as we sit directly across from them, we're happy for them to be able to move forward because they are changing what their original intent was, which was just paving, and now they're going into excavating. But they're, as I said, they are wonderful, wonderful neighbors. If we need something, we've had something break down or whatever, they'll come over with their little Bobcat, help us. We do the same for anybody else in the neighborhood. So that's it.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Right, anyone else like to come forward? All right, seeing none, I'd seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second? Excellent. All those in favor? Excellent. It is, I will close public comment. All right, so any questions, deliberations, thoughts with the board, any further discussion with staff? And then if we see none, then I would seek a motion.
I guess I don't see the normal, this is what we'd recommend you state. So I just want to make sure that the motion, unless I've missed it, is there specifics that you need in the motion relative to distance, site,
No,
signage, size, anything else?
Yeah, I think the language in there is standard. I just I would suggest that we make two motions and vote on first the waiver and then the approved site plan, so.
Okay, can you repeat that, John?
I suggest that we make two motions. One is to approve the waiver, and the waiver is very specific, there's very specific language in the paragraph there. And then secondly, another motion to approve the site plan.
Are you are you referring to the language in section C on the bottom of page 2?
That's correct, yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions from the board for this motion? So they would like two of them. One is a site plan, which is A, correct? And the other is a motion to include the waiver, which is C. I'm not sure what happened to B.
Yeah, so it's references C, the waiver request, and then we have the general staff recommendation, which
Okay.
can be used as
All right,
the final
okay.
motion.
So I'll make a motion then to allow Cooper Paving LLC a waiver from Chapter 60, Section 60-637 to a general provisions regulations pursuant to Chapter 60, Section 60-638B5, as well as a waiver from the following under Chapter 60, Section 60-1301, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 21, 22, 23, and 24 pursuant to Chapter 60, Section 60-1302.
Do you have a second?
Seconded.
Do you have a discussion of this motion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, motion carries. All right, so the next step would be the second motion, and that's under the staff recommendation. The motion with considerations or conditions.
Yeah, I'll see if I can piece this together again. So I make a motion to allow the proposed sign as it meets the 4 conditions of Chapter 60-1277 Site Plan Review of the Auburn Code of Ordinances as per Section 3A of this report, with the following conditions. No development activity until any bonding or inspection fees is determined by the Auburn Engineering Department. Prior to the issuance of a sign permit, the applicant must obtain approval from the Department of Transportation. Any additional signage added to the signpost must come back to the planning board for review and approval, and blasting permit in advance of blasting from the City of Auburn Planning, Permitting, and Code Department.
All right, do you have a second?
Second.
Do you have any discussion of the motion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? All right, excellent, motion carries. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is public hearing site plan review, Stetson Road multifamily. Again, I will pass this over to staff for review.
Deprete Engineering has submitted an application on behalf of AR Building Company. They're applying for a mixed-use development of 56 residential buildings that includes 22 duplexes and 34 quadplexes, which would result in 180 units off of the Stetson Road. Currently, that lot is undeveloped and mostly wooded. And they are requesting a waiver for separation between buildings. So the ordinance has a provision under the multifamily suburban district that does not allow buildings to be, so buildings have to be separated by at least 30 feet or the height of the building, whatever is greater. So in this case, it would be 30 feet. And as they have outlined in their waiver request, some of their things are in compliance, some are not. But they've done what they could with the topography to try to come as much into compliance as they can. They are proposing internal sidewalks. We are working on getting some final plans for some external sidewalks. And utility. We are also working with them still currently on their traffic report, which is going to be over 100 peak hour trips, which will require a DOT traffic movement permit, which the city does have delegated review on, so we will be taking that over once they've submitted it. And there's some updates that we're going to need to see to their utility plan. So overall, staff is recommending that this be tabled tonight, but we still wanted to open up the opportunity, or have an opportunity for public comment since it was already posted and any
Sure, and
additional
I
comments.
appreciate that, Natalie, and I probably should have started off saying that as well, that I think the overall recommendation at this point in time is to table it for some of your considerations. So with that being said, I think this is a great opportunity for us to start the dialogue around this, and I think that you set some of the foundational work already in terms of the why. Like, what are some things that are still in play for us to move forward? This is a very large development. So obviously we want to do it right the first time. You had some, great observations, right? Some actions that need to happen, and I think this is a good opportunity for the board to, start the dialogue and discussion around this project, considering some of the items that Natalie had mentioned.
We were hopeful that the board would consider the waiver today, at least consider that, and if that is appropriate, if not, that would give the applicant some time to readjust the plan or make modifications. So I think in terms of identifying a punch list for the board, I think this would be the first one that we would take on, is the dimensional standard as Natalie had mentioned on the waiver.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit further about that waiver that you're looking for from a dimensional standpoint?
So the current projects right now, the applicant, if you could go to the email that they submitted today, the applicants here, I believe they're willing to speak about it, but they put together a nice PowerPoint presentation on that. I'll just talk briefly. As Natalie mentioned, our requirements is that they need to have 30 feet between each structure under the ordinance under multifamily suburban. Some of these, because of the shape and the form of the land, in particular the wetlands, there's significant wetlands and streams. It really confines the site. So for a lot of the buildings, the placement of the structures meet 30 feet in the front. From that perspective, a road front perspective, but if it's on a radius, and they've got great examples here, the back doesn't meet the 30 feet. So we're still struggling with, say, 75% of the structures that don't meet that horizontal separation. From a waiver standard, for the board's perspective, there's the 4 criteria, and I think environmental is mentioned in there. I think that an environmental waiver, in terms of avoidance and minimization to wetland impacts and to streams and NRPA permits, those types of things, have a valid, reason for not meeting those setbacks. And I will open it up to the applicant, if the applicant's here, to go over their PowerPoint that they put together.
Sure.
Good evening, Brandon Carr with DePreet Engineering. John did a very good job of kind of setting the table, but if we have some slides showing the whole layout and then some zoomed in versions to kind of give you examples of what we're talking about. First, from the existing site, as John mentioned, the center of the site is kind of the high point. It's about 30, if you want to go to the, yeah, so this just shows kind of the context of it. We got the YMCA land to the south. We got 30 acres there. On the right side, you can kind of see those open areas. Those are the wetlands John's referencing. There's pretty much a ridge that runs right through the center. So the center is the high point. It's kind of a plateau, and then it drops off to east to west, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is our layout. As I said, it's 22 duplexes, 34 quadplexes. So the quads are kind of typical looking 3-story townhouses. The duplexes are one level. So we've kind of tried to use that to break up the scale of the building. So when we talk about the minimum separation, the 30 feet, it's not always between two 27-foot tall buildings. So the 3-story townhouses are about 27 feet as defined by the building code. We've tried to alternate for the most of the site between those duplexes, and we've got kind of a streetscape later on that'll show that. As John was saying, the site's about 30 acres, so under the underlying zoning, the allowed density is 17 acres. We're a tick higher than 6, so we're about a third of the allowed density on this site. So when we were looking at this, we really laid out the roads and tried to compact the site. Instead of spreading it out to get the same number of units and utilizing more of the site, trying to compact that, using that building, kind of breaking up the scale of the buildings and also the radiuses. So what we tried to do when we were laying this out was, where the buildings are parallel to each other, try to obtain a minimum separation of 20 feet. And then when we're on the radiuses, if you go to the next slide, Natalie, we have some areas. So this is kind of the south western kind of back portion of the site. And you can see we've done 20 feet between the parallel buildings, but as John said, on the curves of the roads, we've tried to average 30, if you will. So we have like 16 in the back of that one and 45. So we're exceeding the separation in the back, but just because of the angle of the road, we're closer in the front, but we're closer in the back. And then if you go to the next slide, it's kind of another similar area where two parallel faces, we're trying to do a minimum of 20 feet. We did this really just to work with the topography of the site, to limit our kind of earthwork and need for walls and things like that. We've looked at a couple different alternatives, whether it's spreading out the whole site and basically expanding the footprint by 10-15%, increasing the impervious, more tree clearing, getting the same number of units to meet that 30 feet. And the other alternative we looked at was doing some different building types. So we looked at what we could do with the 4plexes, and where we could combine them and do 6-unit buildings in a row. But just given kind of the width of those buildings, when we were starting to look at some of the architect did some quick sketches of what that would look like. We personally thought that the scale of the 4s and the 2s at 20-foot separation looked better than 6s at 30 feet, if that makes any sense. So there's more green openings in say you have 3 6s in a row for a total of 18 units opposed to 4 4s in a row. You have more gaps when you do the less units in a building. I think if you go to the next slide. So this is kind of a quick rendering we had the architect do showing the different heights and scales of the building. So you can see kind of in the foreground there, the 4-unit configuration of the townhouses, and then the smaller scale duplexes. So this is one of the corners where those separations between those buildings are around 20 feet. But you can see by using different scales of heights of roofs and different roof kind of pitches and lines, We think we break it up fairly well.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Did you consider like removing some units to be able to accommodate
We
it?
did, that was keeping the same footprint, we did look at that. That's another alternative. By, decreasing maybe 20 units or so, we could meet it for the majority of the site. We'd still have a
Okay.
couple.
And how many
nights, but
units would you have to remove to meet this?
We were in the ballpark of 20 to,
You'd have to remove 20 units?
yes, or so.
Okay.
That's really it, kind of, our waiver request went into more detail on some of the constraints of the slopes of the land and the wetlands, but that was kind of the high level. If anybody has any questions about the waiver or anything else on the site, we're happy to answer them.
What is the closest distance between any of the units? Is it 16 feet?
16 feet on that, those angled corners is probably, is definitely the closest they would.
Yeah, and then I guess I would ask staff, if we're looking for a waiver, what are we compromising by allowing 16 versus keeping what the standard is? Like, what are we compromising from?
From an aesthetic standpoint, I don't think we're compromising anything by allowing this reduction in the footage between each structure. I think that, from an environmental standpoint, there's a benefit to minimizing the impacts to wetlands. The other part of that is that,
Like emergency services, like trash pickup, like those are the kind of things I'm thinking about, like.
no, it's really about getting the open space and having the additional open space between each structure. I don't see we had fire review this project. We didn't get any comments that way. The project currently meets NFPA code, so all the NFPA codes have been met on this project. I think it's just more of a what they had landed on multifamily suburban in terms of what they thought was the right amount of green space when they wrote the ordinance, many years ago. I don't really have anything that would be in terms of a loss, or is there a concern? Is there a safety concern or anything like that in terms of
Like trash or snow removal or?
Nope, they've satisfied all those. The project is under Site Location Development Act. They will have to address, the 25 criteria that meets the most scrutiny in terms of environmental review for the project. We had a third-party review. There were 6 items that the third-party review engineer reviewed on the project in terms of Site Location and Development Act. The consultant's aware of those. That's part of the punch list of things that, a reason why we're tabling the project. But as well as the traffic movement permit, the TMP that needs to be justified. Early discussions with Sebago Technics, I'm going to change subjects a little bit, but they're not saying that there's really going to be any kind of stacking issue or any kind of intersection issue on the traffic movement permit through our discussion today, but I think it's important that we lay that out. And pedestrian movement is going to be very important coming out of the traffic movement permit and requiring a sidewalk. Tying a sidewalk back to the bridge along Stetson Road, I think is going to be an absolute must. That's about 950 feet. That's additional design that the applicant is going to be responsible for, and additional cost to the project. I think having the additional units may help justify that, to make sure that we get there and to get the project to an approval point and having a nice, safe project. But that kind of ties into the waiver, I think, in a certain way, because I think sidewalks are important, and I think that pedestrian safety is going to be addressed through the TMP. We'll have more information for the board when that gets completed hopefully at the next meeting.
And maybe all of you guys are staying up with this, but I'm trying to understand. So we need additional traffic studies, right? And we need additional sidewalk studies to then accommodate the additional units that we're making a waiver for.
That's exactly
right. But if we didn't do the waiver and we didn't do the additional units, where would we be at from a traffic study and a sidewalk perspective?
I think the sidewalk perspective will always be there. I don't think it's gonna go anywhere, but we're right on the cusp of 100 trips peak hour. If we took away the number of units that they were mentioning, it may get them below the threshold of the TMP, but I think what happens at that point is there's less scrutiny, there's less of a report that's required, there's no permit that is required. I think the additional permitting gives the city more teeth and our delegated review authority to ask for these in the approval of the traffic movement permit.
We're going to see this request for the green space between buildings again. And that what should we be as a board looking at and considering from staff as to why we should give one project a waiver versus another project not a waiver? Because in our packet, the city has suggested in another opportunity that's an issue, whereas it's not an issue here.
And he's referencing the one after this.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, we got to, yeah.
So I guess I don't like setting standards or slippery slopes as to, okay, well, we did it for this, for not. But I guess I'm looking for staff to say, why would you feel justified in saying yes to one but not? I mean, I'm sure we'll get to the other one next, but what should we be looking for and asking in order to make that determination?
So I think it's the applicant, and I'm not gonna, I think we're working on this project, but I'd like to look at each project individually. But just to answer that specific question, David, I think the consultant is working on getting that horizontal separation. There's not as many site constraints on that particular site in terms of wetlands and in terms of elevation changes, fills and cuts and things like that. So, and again, at the end of the day, it's the board's priority. If they're suggesting that they don't want to approve the waiver, I think it's going to be the applicant's responsibility to come back with a different plan. And that may shift a lot of the requirements in terms of we may not see a traffic movement permit and we may not have as much teeth for an additional sidewalk. But I'm thinking under the ordinance, city engineering has some pretty good teeth in their access management, and it's still going to require a sidewalk. But I think now the response would be very clear from my conversation with Sebago Technics today that they're going to be heightened on pedestrian safety.
Okay, because I had heard you say that, something to consider with regard to the current spacing is that, it allows for minimum disruption in other soils, wetlands, minimizes the clearing location, that type of thing. And I would think that some of those arguments would lie true for any project, really. I mean, by putting things denser, we're going to be not clearing as much property, ideally. So I guess I'm just trying to understand the argument.
Yeah, and if we could open up the waiver provision, there's like 4 criteria, and environmental is one of them. It's in our ordinance.
I copied it in our letter too.
Maureen, did you have a comment to add to this?
Yeah, I'm struggling with how making the units more dense is better for the wetlands and why that's the answer rather than reducing the units. Wouldn't reducing the units also have a greater impact on wetland management?
Yes, it could definitely, avoidance is definitely a part of minimization for wetland impacts.
My main concern right now, and we've touched on it several times, and I think other people are thinking the same thing, whether it's 106 peak hour or 86, if we took 20 units away, we're still talking about the majority of that traffic not using River Road, coming up to Route 4, right between Jeep and Volkswagen, right on the speedway that's Route 4. That's my concern. Regardless of how many units are there, when you talk about TMP, are we anticipating potential traffic flow changes at that intersection? I mean, all we have there now is a light. What kinds of changes could we anticipate with pedestrian and driver safety?
That's a spot-on question. We don't have the application. That's part of the reason why we're tabling it. We don't have the study in front of us. We can't review it effectively as a board and as a group. But we felt that there was enough here for the project that we, for example, this waiver and some of the items in the scale of the project, that we felt like it was important that we have a public hearing, we hear from the public, we hear from the board, and we're trying to give the developer clear direction from the city on, you know, what people are looking for, so.
Regardless, if we do table, which, you know, certainly that's the recommendation, would we not also need another public hearing once everything is finalized in order to present that back to the public as to the final plan?
Yes, I think we should have another public hearing. Yep. Okay.
Back to the 30 feet. So I'm hearing you say that really the purpose of that is for green space, not safety or anything like that.
Not necessarily green space, but, you know,
Or open space.
My you know, thought process on that was minimization of wetlands and impacts to, you know, natural resources. You know, you can get there by eliminating units and minimizing it that way as well.
Is the rest of the property accessible for use, like walking or hiking, or?
Yes.
I know there's not a ton, but.
Yeah, it's not inaccessible in any way. I mean, it's walkable. There's some pretty
Okay.
steep slopes on the eastern side, but yeah, it's not restricted in any way.
Okay, it'd be nice to make sure that that's accessible, like, I'm assuming you're not putting a fence around the whole thing?
No.
'Cause I've seen that in other places. But
No, that's not
Okay,
a
good.
proposal of ours.
Are we still looking for those other two reasons or bases for accepting or approving a waiver besides environmental?
Yeah, we're trying to find the waiver provisions.
I had copied a section into our letter, and the way what Natalie shared with me, it says, in order to grant a waiver from this requirement of the ordinance, the planning board must find, due to special circumstances of a particular plan, provisions of certain required improvements are not requisite in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, or are inappropriate because of inadequacy or lack of connecting facilities adjacent or in proximity to the proposed subdivision. It may waive such requirements subject to those conditions. So I think it speaks to density as it relates to kind of the natural features, as John mentioned, public safety. And then I would assume that the facilities would reference water and sewer, which we've met with the town and, I mean, the city, and there's availability for both for our development. Thank you.
Guess to Maureen's point, when I look through on the bottom of page 3 of our packet where it talks about the 4 bullets, you know, reducing the not approving the waiver and just reducing potentially the number of units certainly accomplishes the same 4 bullets. So, I don't know, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying in my head to try to figure out how to get to yes, and I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. So he's reading bullet number 4. The compact layout reduces environmental disturbances, minimizes impervious surface areas, and enhances stormwater management practices. I get the compact layout does that. I mean, I'm not sure that I'm understanding weaving in reducing that from 30 to 16 does that. That's, I don't know if the board is there and I'm just not there.
No, I think this, calling this special circumstances is a misnomer. The special circumstances that we are trying to put too many residences on a lot.
I agree. That's personally how I'm feeling too, yeah. And then, and forgive me, I know we've had like several different topics as we're discussing this waiver. Do you mind talking a little bit further about the traffic study? So it sounds like we don't have a full traffic study yet. You're still asking for the waiver? Or you're asking for the waiver?
So, yeah, there isn't a traffic movements application yet. We haven't
Okay.
received, the city has not received it yet, so.
Okay, so that would ask us to grant this waiver, grant the additional units without a traffic study to,
Just, at this point, just the waiver so they can move forward. If the board decides not to move forward with the waiver, then they may not need a traffic movement permit.
okay.
So.
And how
we could
many
still
units
address-
tip that to traffic to not traffic?
I'm sorry?
Do you know how many units tip to need a traffic study versus not need it?
You know, I don't know. It's based on the ITE manual and it's based on the housing.
You don't know that off the top of your head? Really, John?
It's about, it's about 20 units.
Okay.
And we've been
I
talking.
had wondered that. You had referenced
Yeah,
20, so,
and we've
yeah.
been talking to John, and the reason we wanted to come here tonight was to would not necessarily get an approval, especially on the waiver, but direction from the board if, how the board was feeling about our waiver request before we went forward and modified our plans. We still have, there's some revisions we need to make for water and sewer comments we received today. Sebago Technics is working on the traffic analysis. So before we went ahead and did all those revisions, we just wanted to come and we knew it was already on the agenda and talk through the request with the board.
And just reaching out for a bit of clarity. If the waiver was granted, that is not solidifying the number of proposed units. Is that correct?
That is correct, but it would probably be more likely to be that number that they're, presenting tonight. It'd be closer to that number.
It's harder to take it away than once it's given, so.
I really want the traffic study.
Yes.
That's huge. Because whether it's 106 or 86, that 20 units is kind of irrelevant to what it's going to do to the impact on Route 4 in that intersection. I'm trying to find the middle ground of approving the waiver while still leaving some flexibility with the number of units.
Can we also, I guess this would be a question for staff, can we request the traffic study regardless of whether or not we approve the waiver or not?
We can, but there won't be the city wouldn't issue a traffic movement permit. We can still request traffic information, yes.
And if I can jump in, and the applicant can stop me if I'm speaking out of turn, but if we want to table the waiver request as well, and we could have our traffic engineer for your benefit, they're preparing the traffic report based on 180 units, so that will show the impact of those, those intersections. We could have them kind of do another parallel analysis, not a full report, but say, if we drop 20 units, would that make a major impact on the abutting streets? Or like you said, if it's a minimal change to drop the 20 units to get in hand with the waiver, hopefully maybe that shows a little clarity as well. So we can table that as well and just come back with a full package and have that discussion before we go ahead and modify the entire plan. Obviously it's up to the board to give us direction, but that's, we're open to, doing some additional analysis if that's what the board needs to see.
Yeah, I think the temperature I'm gauging from the board is that we are not.
It's loud and clear. Yeah.
I mean, am I wrong? Is anyone, okay.
With a traffic report, who reviews that report? Just at the local level, or does it go to the state?
We have delegated review. We can review it here. We can ask DOT to review it as well, but typically it's done at the local level.
Because I agree with Tim, we need to know that impact, because I think not only do we have access directly to Route 4, but I guess there's an impact even on the River Road. So I think a report with respect to traffic is imperative, and I would not want to vote with respect to this waiver either way tonight. I would, if there are some in the public, I look forward to maybe some public input as well.
I agree with Bob. On a side note, I like the project. I like the buildings. I like the floor plans.
Thank you.
I'm not anti-project. I personally am very concerned about the traffic. And that's with all the dealerships right there, the movie theater, that's the beginning of the raceway right there. And it's just, with everything we see that happens on Route 4, that's a huge concern to me personally.
I totally understand. We appreciate the feedback, and that's why we wanted to come tonight to get that and, see what the board would, what questions they had and what, additional information they would want.
Perfect.
If you want to, I don't know if you want to open up for public comment or.
Okay.
or what, if there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer them, but.
Perfect. Okay. All right, good discussion. At this moment, I would seek a motion to open it up for public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, at this point in time, you can come to the podium, state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes. Okay, seeing none, I would seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Perfect. All right, so we still need a motion on this project, but, and we can have a discussion as well. We still need to table it. Yes, thank you. We still need to table it. But, I'm in agreement with Tim. I think it's, it's a nice project. I mean, it's obviously not something that, I think it's going to be fun to review and look at and work on. So I think it's probably one of the bigger ones we've had, right? If not one of the biggest ones we've had, so. Okay, at this moment.
John, are you looking for us to provide the purposes behind the tabling, or could we just make a motion to table until February 11th planning board meeting to allow the applicant to work with the city to finalize all outstanding issues?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, and I think we should notify the public on a date certain of that. I think that's important as well.
Yeah, I had mentioned the February 11th planning board, so date certain on that.
30 days is enough. That's within parameters of what you guys need as well.
So I put some feelers out today, and they were saying that they were going to get the information back to us. So I'm feeling confident that they're going to hit the required deadline. So January 31st for us. Yep.
And if come January 31st, things are still open, then you'll notify us that that'll be extended to March or whenever things are ready.
Yeah, we'll have to do I think we got to do another vote at that point because we've got a date certain. So we would hold another vote, but we'd just have a one line item. No one would come and speak, and there wouldn't be any kind of public comment. So
Do we need the date certain to give you guys the time? I mean, we're happy to give it to you and then have to kick the can again if need to be, but
It's required for tabling a project. You have to give a certain date that it will be coming back for the public and for the applicant as well. And at that meeting, if they aren't back, it's okay, but you just have to give another date certain for when they will be back.
part of that is really, we're going to be selfish and honest here, is that we would have to resend all the public notices and post everything again. So if we're notifying the public now with a date certain, I think we're solid going forward without having to do that.
thank you. Well, Well, I guess I'll move to table the site plan and waiver request for the proposed development on Stetson Road until a date certain, February 11th, 2025, planning board meeting, to allow the applicant and staff sufficient time to resolve any open and outstanding issues.
Seconded.
Is there discussion? No? All right. All those in favor? All right.
Sorry if I jumped again.
No, all good. All right. Okay. Next item on the agenda is our public hearing site plan review for Danville Corner Housing Development. Alrighty. I will hand it over to staff.
So this is a proposal by Tim Millett to construct 44 single-family homes with 2-car garages, sidewalks, and a paved drive aisle on a 7.27 acre lot off Danville Corner Road. And our staff's biggest, I don't know if concern's the right word, but biggest thing that we really would appreciate from the planning board tonight is a direction on is the density for the site. So the requirement for density in the district is specified by the unit type. So single-family homes are 4 units per acre, while multifamily homes or multifamily dwellings are allowed at 17 units per acre. And if you're looking at these as each a single-family home, then the density would not be allowed on this site. But if you're looking at it as a multi-unit development, because they are all going to be under shared ownership, the lot is going to continue to be owned by one person, and these will be sold individually on the lot. You might consider it under the 17 unit of the multifamily. We are also asking for a table on this one because they have some of the same issues with the building separation, as well as some updated plans that left some things that still need to be updated, like the trails and their snow storage, and some additional details on their utilities that we're still working out with the developer.
Okay, so I think you saw this coming. So why did the other project get a waiver, and are you seeking a waiver on this one for the 30-foot separation?
So we talked with the applicant about their options, and they felt that they could meet the 30-foot separation. Oh, yes, sir.
I'm Craig Sweet with Teradyne Consultants on behalf of Tim Millett. We've gone through, and with the exception right now, and we haven't fully fleshed it out because we're waiting to see how tonight comes with the density, we were able to meet the 30 feet there. We had them at 25 in our original, and then we were able to shift things around and get that 30 feet. So I don't think we're going to be requesting a waiver for that.
Okay.
I think we'll be able to meet the 30 without any issues.
So you were requesting a 25-foot versus a 30, and the other one was like a 16 versus a 30, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we had never actually asked for a waiver. I think there was, on our end, we had a 25. I thought that missed the standard on that. We thought it was.
I'm sorry.
We thought it was 25 in that area, so we need to make it 30 anyway. So we were doing that on our end.
So when I look here, when you look at the staff, so the building separation, that's no longer a consideration, meeting the 30-foot separation, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so there was a bunch of buildings that were identified that didn't meet the separation, and what the consultant's saying is that they've now modified the plan and now can meet the 30-foot separation.
Yeah, we had some where the rear to the side of it was 25 feet still, but I thought that was allowable in the area. But John corrected me that it needs to be 30 on every side. So we went through and we've updated that.
Can you guys all hear him okay?
Sorry, I gotta like bend in half, sorry. Yeah, so when we originally laid it out, we were under the impression mistakenly that from rear to side, it could be less than 30. But we've gone through and adjusted that. It hasn't been submitted yet because we're waiting for clarification on the density, but we've gone through on our end and I don't see any issues with it meeting that for the 30 feet.
My real question is, it's not a multifamily unit development. So I'm having a hard time applying a single-family dwelling standard for density.
Yeah, so it's similar to what we do for condominiums, or even similar to what you'd see in almost it's not, but similar to what a mobile home park would be, where it's one common ownership, where the applicant's going to maintain ownership of the land, and then the units themselves are going to be sold. The infrastructure and the open space is going to be owned and maintained by the applicant. So it's I think as Eric pointed out in his letter, it's kind of a hybrid in between. It's not really an either one kind of.
So let me ask you a question. If they went from 44 single units, right? So say you, to Bob's point, does not agree with that, applying that, and they did multifamily units. So would that increase the density? Would it increase the units?
It could. The site could support, I believe, 120 at that density.
Okay,
so we're looking to do less dense single family. And the applicant, Tim, he's done units like this before, and he finds that this is a really good option for first-time home buyers to get into it. It's because they don't own the land. It's their taxes are cheaper. The homes are a little bit less expensive, and they can get a higher-end home. Or folks looking to downsize and they don't want to do a lot of the maintenance and have the requirements that they need. And he said he's had really great luck with that before in another development, and and he's kind of trying to do the same thing here. Find something that would fit that affordability price range for people, because single family lots are kind of getting very expensive everywhere in the state right now. So he's trying to hit that niche market to allow people to have ownership of their homes, whether it be first-time home buyers or people looking to downsize and not rent, and have that feeling kind of if it's a different feeling if you're in a single-family home versus a duplex kind of thing.
We have seen a lot of duplexes, so This is my first time seeing a single family. Yeah, so Maureen, did you have a question?
But these are single-family homes.
They're single-family dwellings, yeah, but they're not on lots kind of that would match like a standard single-family subdivision where you'd see the road and, for this example, 44 lots.
Right, but they're not multi-dwelling units.
They're not multi-dwelling units.
They are single-family
no.
homes.
Yeah, similar, and they'd be like a condo development, more or less.
But it's not a condo.
No, because he's retaining ownership of the land.
Okay, thank you.
And I will just note that there's no opportunity for these to be split into single-family home lots based on the dimensional standards we have currently.
So if they went to duplexes, could you get the same number of units?
I believe you could have if you just switch these, you'd have 88 units if you just switch them to duplexes. It'd be a much denser site in terms of units.
Would you meet the 30-foot separation?
You would still need that, yeah. But he could go to like apartment building, like multifamily 6-unit buildings, which would increase the density, which is he's not looking to increase it that much. But in theory, he could add up to, I think, 122 units based on the density standards of multifamily.
So it sounds like staff feels that this is a good balance between density versus resolving a need that the city has with regard to providing affordable single-family homes for individuals that are in that price point.
And we struggled with this same dilemma, I guess, that we keep hearing that there needs to be more homes available for ownership. And then this doesn't fit the definition exactly of either style of home. Single families are typically on their own lots. They could be condominiums. This is multiple dwelling units or buildings with dwelling units within one complex. Our multifamily residential definition is clear that it has to be one building or several buildings within one complex. We've always seen and considered multifamily as attached buildings, so multiple units within one structure. That's not explicit in the definition, so we wanted to offer some wiggle room in that because we think that the outcome may be getting less of an affordable dwelling type that is desirable. But I think there's a lot of ways that they could modify their plans after having feedback from the board. They can take some of these, attach them, make them duplexes. They could take, some of these individual units away and make multifamily buildings. So maybe mix in a 3-unit or a 6-unit or a 12-unit. They could get to a much higher density than what they're proposing. And we struggled with getting an outcome that might not be as desirable by pushing that strict sort of traditional interpretation of single family versus multi.
I can see how you got there, and it's a very creative use of the definition, and I appreciate that. And I can now understand why it can be defined multifamily, because it's not individual lots, it's all one person, and that they are single-family homes. So far, I'm correct, right?
That's correct. And I will add that, the language that Eric is using is state language. State law language. And just to add one more piece, if they just took 3 of these units and made it one cluster of a triplex, it changes the whole calculation, and it makes it much, much more units, and changes the density, changes the look of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm personally not advocating for that. That's just me. But I'm satisfied by your explanation of how you can define it as a multifamily. That's all I'm saying.
John, we've had this question. I had this question before to you a while back. In the previous application, we saw some elevations, some floor plans, that type of thing. Whereas I didn't see that for this application. When are we? Is that
It should be in the packet. I'm sorry.
Is it in the packet?
Yeah. I think you just passed it.
Maybe I'm.
Yes, that's the style he's looking at. So they're single family. There's a front porch, and then we had some landscaping in the front, and then the driveways themselves were big enough for 2 cars.
Okay, I thought I'd heard a 2-car garage, but it's 2-car parking.
Yeah, and they're all 18 to 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk, where the sidewalk is, which is plenty of space for 2 cars to park side by side. We showed some landscaping in the front. A couple of them have to be tilted to the side, but they're landscaped as well. And then we had all internal sidewalks and a little trail system in the center, so left about 65% of the site as green space as well for the use of the residents.
I actually don't see that in our packet.
I don't have it either.
Okay.
The other concern I have is that this is kind of a unique general business area in the sense that it really hasn't developed into a dense type general business that we would think of either downtown or close to the downtown or part of a strip type development. Actually, surrounding this is quite rural in character. Some open pasture, some wooded land, some of the older farmhouses, further up. So I'm having some difficulty, and I guess it goes to a question of the ownership of the land and how the total parcel is going to be maintained over time. If it's not an LLC, and each individual lot is going to be up to the individual person to maintain, I think over time, it tends to not be maintained maybe to the point that we would consider acceptable for an LLC, for instance, where...
So I'm just going to ask, is that a consideration? And the only reason why I ask that is because I distinctly remember the years of Stable Ridge and reviewing that project, and there was a very similar concern that you have such a big project and the owners of the project would not maintain it in a fashion that would be, you know, they wouldn't maintain it and it would become dilapidated and it would be an eyesore to the community. So my question is, I've dealt with this before, these questions of who maintains it, you know, if it is a multifamily unit like Stable Ridge and they don't maintain it. So is that part of our consideration? Because I remember going through this with Stable Ridge and people asking, like, what happens if they don't maintain it? It's going to be a huge eyesore on the top of Goff Hill, and you know what I mean? I remember going through all of that.
I think, well, just to carry on my conversation, this is quite different than that project because this was going to be owned and maintained from the beginning, and they only rent as opposed to sell. So it comes down to they buy a structure, so that they're not buying a lot.
Correct, there's no lots.
So I'm assuming then that the property owner, they own everything up to the structure, including the driveway.
They would, yes.
Okay, but not be, for any landscaping, the owner would still be responsible.
By owner, do you mean the homeowner or the house itself or the landowner?
Landowner.
Yes, they would technically be responsible for
Okay.
it, yeah.
So usually a condominium, then the condominium would take care of the exterior facade, roof, etc. So in this case, then the structure would be owned and then be, maintenance would be responsible inside and outside, but the landscape would be retained by the property owner.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and I guess I don't see that as a concern. You know, what happens 2, 3, 4, however many years, you know, that's not, in my opinion, our responsibility or purview. Ours is whether or not it fits within the zoning regulations and they've met the requirements set forth in the zone and the staff is satisfied with the application.
And by approval, obviously you're not being asked to do that tonight, but by approval of the plan with the landscaping plan, they're obligated to maintain landscaping in a way that's similar to what's on the approved plan. And I don't know that it really matters, but it is. We know that Tim Millett is the principal or one of the principals of the LLC, but it is owned by an LLC, Danville Corner Road LLC.
And I appreciate you calling that out, Eric, because I think certainly to me the landscaping plan is important. I think, you know, I go down Center Street and I see the 2 units that were put up by Verizon, and you know, really enjoy the fact that we've incorporated as part of the approval process that greenery. I think it looks really nice, and I think it's an important component of these types of projects.
And I think I hear what you guys are saying, just to add a little bit to this, and we'll have time to work with the developer, but having a condition in there about maintenance and continued maintenance for the longevity of the project and tying that to the approval of the site plan, I think could be appropriate. So I would just lend that as something that would be something that we can explore with language with the developer to make sure that there's tight language in the approval process that makes sure that the land outside of the structure gets maintained and everything stays kind of tidy in a good way over many years.
And staff is comfortable with the city supporting and having to enforce that?
Yes.
Okay.
The other concern that I have, and it's similar to discussion with respect to traffic, this puts a cluster of traffic generation in one spot that is going to concentrate entering Washington Street North. This goes back to the ongoing, and I bring us up to date. I think there was maybe a suggested, maybe for a year, closing the opportunity to cross Washington Street from either side, that maybe a right turn only would be tested. Where are we with that?
Yeah, so there was a proposed safety project that was a test with Maine DOT. There was some debate about what the right solution is, I think, at the city council level and with the state. And the state came back, and instead of proposing that, and I think partly at the request of the council, they came back with consideration for a traffic signal there instead. I think that debate is ongoing, what the right solution is. We have the Washington Street study going on right now that starts at Allied Road, just to the south or west of this site, and continues all the way to the Rotary. So it's that whole section of Washington Street. That study, our goal with that study, in part, is to inform that decision and then have a decision made about what the right fix is there, whether it's, there's a lot of value, in my opinion, in maintaining the higher speed mobility corridor and not having another traffic signal for the amount of traffic that passes through there. But that also limits the movements, so I understand why people that use that cross movement or turn left there would be interested in keeping the light. So there's a couple of solutions being considered. Neither one has been decided on, but we should have the first draft of that Washington Street study later this winter, early spring. And I think the council can use the recommendations from the engineers and the land use recommendations to help make the decision on which solution is the right one for the long term. But there's two options. Either one, I think, could address that safety concern, because there's a legitimate concern there for left turns at those intersections, or the cross movement is a movement that's causing a lot of accidents.
And I would just say, if this project was approved, I think that's something that would be the staff's responsibility to share that with the consultants that are working on these options. So the additional trips that are being generated through this project should be added into that study and included. I think that's a good point.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, seeing none, I am going to seek a motion to open it up to public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, excellent. So please come to the podium, state your name, you have 5 minutes, and your address.
My name is Susan Lundquist. I live at 473 Old Danville Road. To your point, it is very rural. Our neighborhood is very rural. I own 23 acres. I like the fact that it's very rural. I like seeing all that. I know my neighbors all own, my next door neighbor owns about, I think, 48 acres. My other neighbor to the other side, we have a Spurwink home, and we bought more land behind so that we can maintain that kind of open neighborhood. Everybody around this area is very rural and has large parcels of land, and not to be that I'm not against development, because I am, but this is a huge density, and the traffic is incredible. I will tell you, going over that little bit of bridge, the railroad bridge that gets onto Washington Street, I will tell you, first of all, in the winter, it's dangerous as all get out because it's very narrow, and everybody has to stop at the top so that you don't slide into Washington Street. And I will tell you, I personally probably see an accident right there almost every single month, sometimes more than once or more than multiple times in the course of a month. So when you add 44 units, just the impact of that much more traffic coming, there is no other way to get off of Old Danville Road unless you go Main Street, and then that's, again, very high density with schools and things like that, or there's no other way to get to Washington Street or to get to the Turnpike. So for my personally, I think it's a lot of housing for an area that just doesn't have any kind of housing like that. I'm not against, as I said, I'm not against development. I just have concerns about traffic. I wonder about water and sewage. How is that going to be maintained? It is a very rural neighborhood that people walk on. They snowmobile through the trails. They'll snowmobile through my property. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with people hiking through the woods and stuff. We have actually made trails for people. This is really compact. You have the turnpike on one side, basically, and then you just have other property owners on the other. So I don't know how that's going to work, but I think it's an awful lot of houses for a very small area. So thank you.
My name is Dan Moreno. I live at 41 Presidential Way, not too far from there. I have a little sketch. I was wondering if I could share that with you all.
Sure. You can just hand it and we can pass it down in the interest of time.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. So let's see let's see where I'll start here. One, I'm in favor of affordable housing. Big advocate. I'm an architect. I'm a huge advocate for affordable housing. I will speak to the positives right off the bat. I would encourage the city to change their ordinance so that people can actually own the land too. It takes away the hurdles down the road if the developer, no offense, I don't know who it is, but if for some reason the business goes under, and who's going to manage the property at that point? So on that front, I would definitely suggest doing that. I'm really speaking more towards, one, the density and Washington Street. So as you can see in this little sketch that I provided. Coming down onto Washington Street, it's very steep, and it ices up. Now, I haven't lived there very long. I lived there since 2021. I built a brand new house, part of the Buford McFarland development off of Mountain View. And it gets very icy. It's very, very steep. It's actually steeper than Hampshire Street, I believe. And so I have to tell my daughter and my wife, don't stop on the incline, stop on the top of the bridge or before, and just get your bearing on there. But it's very precarious from that aspect of it. So, and then turning onto Washington Ave to turn left to go to the Turnpike or to go south, you have to kind of like stage it, leap across when the traffic's really busy. And so what they do is they huddle right in the middle lane, in the turning lane right there. And sometimes if someone else is in a hurry, they double stack. That's why I'm showing you in that image there, two cars in both directions, coming or going. They'll turn in squadron formation, so to speak, and they take turns. Very, very precarious, and really should be addressed. I've only been there since 2021, and there's a handful of accidents there. Not to mention people travel, and in the wintertime, the headlights, the visual of being able to see the vehicles, you can't tell if a motorcycle is coming really close to you, or if it's a car further back, because there's so much traffic in the headlights and there's not a lot of light there on that part of the street. The turn-off lane from Washington Street onto Old Danville Road, very, very narrow. You almost have to be in the shoulder, and then you can't go up with any agility or speed to keep things going, so you don't have people backing up waiting for you, because it's very steep to turn up and go up the hill. And then, of course, people going across Washington Ave, okay, onto the other side. So it's really a lot. And what I'm suggesting here is you put in a traffic light, slow it down right there. It'll do a lot of good. put one in that maybe it's activated by vehicles at that point on Old Danville Road. But it's for the success of his project and eliminates a whole bunch of other problems that you could probably have from that development. I know that the traffic light's not really part of this thing, but I'm voicing it now because this is gonna be the incubator to grow other developments on Old Danville Road. So you really want to get ahead of the curve on that. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward?
Hi, Spencer Dunn, 530 Court Street, and previous resident of 196 Beach Hill Road, which was in this area. I would implore the board to keep consistent with its development pattern over the past few years. This is one of the lowest density projects that will have been approved by this board in recent memory, and is very much in keeping with the 2020 Comprehensive Plan and revision of the 2020 Comprehensive Plan in regards to high growth areas where we want to increase density. Based on the existing zoning of this being in a business or district, this is arguably one of the lower density uses that could be put here, it seems, based on my reading and understanding of previous materials for this meeting and based on other projects that I have been privy to over the past few years in this city. This is very much in keeping with the needs of the community and those who have voiced that over the past few years. And it seems like, all things considered, it would be a good project. For those that are concerned about the maintenance of the property, I would implore you to look at projects like Granite Mill Estates or Colonial Estates on Hotel Road. There's also another large-scale development on the end of Hardscrabble Road that meets with Washington that is much larger than this would be, that was built sometime when I was a child still living on Beach Hill Road, that had similar concerns at the time and ultimately ended up being more than worthwhile for that area and was a right fit and was far higher density than this. That was a 3-story project with multi-unit buildings. So I would strongly encourage the board, I understand this is just a review, but when it comes time to make approvals for this project, this seems to be a good fit for the needs of the city of Auburn and in keeping with the growth patterns desired by existing comprehensive plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward? All right, seeing none, I would seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Excellent, so public comment is closed. Okay, so this is our time to have discussion, more discussion, conversation, discussion with staff to see, what your thoughts are. Obviously, in your packet, there is a recommendation from staff to table. Make sure I have the right one. As there are some considerations that still need to be met, but what we can definitely take off of that, right, is the building separation, because we know that the developer has already said that they've accommodated the 30-foot separation.
So I appreciate the creativity and the interpretation of the ordinance, and I'm not in any way anti-development, and I do see the value in this type of project. But it feels kind of disingenuous to have an application before us that says a site plan approval to construct 44 single-family homes, but they actually aren't single-family homes. Maybe we should interpret it differently. If we are going to have standards in our ordinances, I do feel like we should be strictly observing those unless there's a really compelling reason to waive them. Otherwise, we're really opening the door to problems down the road when a project comes before us that maybe we don't like as much and end up interpreting the ordinance in a stricter way and really opening the door for appeals. So I would not be in favor of considering this a multifamily units rather than single-family homes, especially when the application in front of us explicitly says 44 single-family homes.
So would you like to see something different?
No, I would like to apply the standard, the density standard for single-family homes to this project.
I guess I would ask staff, when you were considering this, you said that based on the language and how the ordinances were written, given that they aren't individual lots, that it wasn't clear and that there was room for interpretation to be able to consider this as multifamily because the land was still retained under management of one individual?
And that there are residential units in several buildings in one complex was specifically what was in the definition. And it does challenge our normal traditional view of the way that we've seen multifamilies for sure, but I think the strict reading of that leaves some room for that. And the alternative is there are a lot of other ways that they can get to this density. They can either keep it single family and make part of the development affordable. They're already planning to offer the units for sale in a range that is very close to the price that would meet the state's definition of affordable. What it also does, though, is it limits the income of the buyers to that same number, which reduces the number of buyers that would be available, even if the pricing is still affordable. So we were talking with the developer. We wanted to try to have this conversation. So if the general consensus is that we can't apply that multifamily standard for density, then what we could do is between now and the next time this comes back, work with the developer to figure out which option they want to do to try to keep the same number of units or to reduce the number of units. They could make some of them affordable, keep the same layout. They could combine some of the buildings so that they're attached and they'd become multifamily buildings that meet our sort of traditional view of that. They would still be multiple units, multiple buildings on one complex. It would just be a mix of structures that contain one or more.
So you're saying there could be 44 units, but some could be attached, and then that would then meet the standard? Okay.
We could mix the housing types and also mix that density within a project. We've done that in the past.
Would that also allow for even greater, though, density potentially if they so chose? I guess I'm balancing the fact that
Me too.
there could have been a lot more here, and the developer clearly has decided that that's not of their interest and are hoping that this is a nice balance. So
That could happen, and I guess we as staff just didn't want to have that debate privately, not bring it here, and decide how that was going to move forward. So your feedback is how we can figure it out.
To make them duplexes to count as a multifamily is just a creative use of the definition on the other end of the spectrum, really.
There's, in the general business zoning district, there is a column that allows for housing types. And so one family is 4 units per acre, 2 families or duplexes would be 6 units per acre, and then multifamily, which would be 3 and up, is 17 units per acre.
So again, back to, getting to a triplex, you could do one triplex, get 17 units per acre, and then the remaining could be the single family. It's just the end result, I don't think, is a better project. The value, I think, goes down. It changes the uniformity. There's a lot of losses for trying to have a strict interpretation of the ordinance from our perspective.
Well, is the strict interpretation just on what we've seen in the past? Because it doesn't really sound like an interpretation. If it meets the definition, it meets the definition. It's just not what the vision of what we've seen before, as far as I'm seeing it anyway.
Yeah, you're bringing up the traditional comprehension of it. And what I think the point's being made is that traditional observation of the definition might be more limiting than the definition really is.
Would making some of them duplexes impact the values of the purchasing them?
I don't know for purchasing. I don't know for purchasing. I know that Tim, the applicant, has said he's done a development like this before, and he prefers to keep it all single family. He thinks it works better, and he's had success with it in the past, and people were very happy in the neighborhoods with the single family homes, and that's his intent. He'd prefer to keep it that way.
So they get to buy it and sell it when they want to.
Yeah, and then they get the home ownership to a single family home at the price.
And whether they maintain it or not affects what they sell it for in the future. So
correct. Yeah.
That's just how any other house works.
Correct. Yeah.
These different styles of housing and mixing unit types is happening more and more places to try to make the numbers work where we lack affordable housing.
I'll just be honest with you, it's a little refreshing. I mean, considering that last project, not that I'm opposed to the last project, but I mean, that is obviously very dense. I mean, we've had a lot of very dense projects, and for once it feels refreshing to have something that isn't a multi, it just feels refreshing in my mind, and I think it just adds just another dimension to it, so.
And it's probably a good case study for the housing committee to look at our ordinance and see if it is preventing something that might be desirable.
I guess if the board is considering this, the other option to make it clean if we're talking about the true interpretation is the applicant could ask for a waiver. I was a little hesitant after our other conversation to bring this up, but there seems to be more of a compelling story for a waiver here in terms of, what the need is in the community. That could be another option for the board to consider back to the applicant as well as writing a waiver.
I guess you're probably going to go here too. My concern with the waiver request is that you're assuming that what you're asking for is not allowed as part of the ordinance, or at least that's my interpretation of when someone is requesting a waiver. But what I'm hearing from staff is that it technically, while it's not how we originally have thought of what a multi-unit looks like, by reading of the ordinance, it doesn't mean that it's not allowed. Whereas someone coming forward to say, I'm requesting a waiver, to me automatically kind of puts it into a defensive, we know that, or we feel that we're not in compliance with the ordinance, and I guess I wouldn't want to encourage that.
I guess I'd ask, what is the definition of multi-unit?
Yeah, and I have it in the staff report. It's multifamily residential, also known as multi-dwelling unit, is a classification of housing where multiple separate housing units for residential inhabitants are contained within one building or several buildings within one complex. So I've never thought of it that way. We've never seen a proposal quite like this, but it is a single parcel, a single complex, with multiple residential units, but it definitely warrants some clarification if that's the interpretation for the future, at least.
So that is the definition that's in the ordinance presently?
We don't have a definition specifically for multifamily housing. So I think it's just always been understood that it's multiple units.
On a single lot, and that's what this is, right? Multiple units. They're individual units.
But it's not in the ordinance.
But the ordinance says that it's a single lot with multiple units, and
That's the state definition of multifamily. So it's not in our local ordinance, but it is adopted by the state.
It's not actually included in our local ordinance. There is no definition for that specific term.
But we don't have anything that specifically excludes this concept.
No, we looked through and couldn't find that, and that's we just didn't want to make that decision in a vacuum without having this discussion.
So we do have a definition of multi-unit structure in our ordinance. Yes or no?
No, I don't believe we do. I looked everywhere for that term and couldn't find it in the definitions section.
But what you recited is the state's definition, and this falls within the state's definition.
Correct.
Okay, and I want to be I'm just going to kind of put the elephant out there in this room too. So I just want to reiterate for everybody that this is a general business district, right? And there is development that is allowed on this parcel of land. And I can be sympathetic and am sympathetic to traffic. If anyone watched me on the Stable Ridge, I honed in on that repeatedly. Understanding though that this parcel of land, albeit undeveloped, is in a developable area, right? So I want to make sure that when we're looking at projects, we're looking at them on a clean basis in terms of the zoning, the ordinance, what is allowed, and not just because it's not been developed and it's pristine land and we want to keep it that way. So that's where we have different zones, different ordinances that allow for that space. This space allows for general business development. So I want to be clear that when we're looking at this space, we're looking at it from a development standpoint, and does this project meet that allowable development in this area? So I just want to be cognizant of that.
Thank you, Stacy.
Welcome. All right. So at this point in time, I know that we do have in our packet a motion or movement to table the discussion until February 11th.
Well, I'll go ahead and throw a motion then to table the Danville Corner project to date certain February 11th, 2025 planning board meeting to allow the applicant time to update the plans to address the necessary revisions identified by staff and to work through with staff any other open items.
Ready, do you have a second?
Seconded.
Do you have a discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is to vote for chair and vice chair. So do I just open it up?
Yep.
Okay, does anyone want to nominate a chair?
I would nominate Stacy LeBlanc.
Oh, geez, okay, do I have to second it?
Second.
Do we have a second? Okay, all those in favor? All right, motion carries. Oh, all right. Now, the next item on the agenda is vice chair elections. Do I have a nomination?
I nominate Paul Jacques.
Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
All right, everyone in favor? Okay, motion carries. Great. Looks like we are in the same position. All right, next item is public comment. So I would open it up to public comment. If anyone wants to come forward, say your name. You have 5 minutes and your address. All right, seeing none, we'll move to miscellaneous.
So some upcoming agenda items. We have 2 solar projects coming to you next month. I only have one of them on there, but there will be one off of Stetson Road and one off of East Waterman Road. Oh, no, sorry, not Stetson Road, Penley Corner, I think. Okay, two solar projects coming next month. And Stetson Road will be coming back as tabled tonight, and Danville Corner will be coming back as tabled tonight, and then the city project for Engine 2 will be coming next month. And I think those are all the projects that we've gotten in.
That's correct.
And then we have a joint meeting, or the planning board has a joint meeting with the city council to talk about the bona fide farms and bona fide recreation in the ag zone on January 21st. I don't know.
Yeah, that will be at 5:30 PM, the workshop. We'll get another notice out to you. But the city attorney will be there to provide an overview of the definition and the legality of that definition, and the sort of the status of it as accessory or not accessory to agriculture as a single family.
Will that be held in this room or in the other room?
I believe it will be in this room. I don't think they're doing the workshops across the hall anymore.
Okay.
But I can clarify, we can clarify that in the notice.
Okay, yeah, if you don't mind.
And there was, I think, 1 or 2 board members that had asked about the vacant seat on the planning board. And we got the notice today from the city clerk that there were 5 applications. So Maureen Hopkins, one of our members already, David Trask, also a member already, Bilal Hussein, Dennis Turgeon, and Douglas Arthur Smith. So the appointments committee will meet Monday night, actually, the 21st, and make a recommendation to the council that'll come back probably at the first meeting in February for a decision.
The comp plan is meeting 2 weeks from now. The comp plan committee, right?
I don't recall.
It's the 28th.
The 28th,
Yeah.
yeah. I believe it is the 28th.
I just want to make sure that Riley and I will be going to that people, if you want input from the planning board, to email us.
Great.
Just saying.
What time are those meetings? Comp plan?
The first one, I believe, was 6 PM. We can get that out with the notice, though, for the other meeting. We'll make sure we have that schedule published for the planning board.
Okay, at this moment, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, meeting is over.